Good afternoon, everyone. It is so good to see so many of you here. For those of you who I have not yet met, my name is Dr. Tamika Hobbs, and I have the privilege of serving as the manager for this building, the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, which we affectionately refer to as ARLIC. Glad to have you here. Thank you. This is a bit of a unique program today. We have a regular series, I call it a signature program series, called Cultural Conversations that we use to host authors and filmmakers, thought leaders of all types. And then we have exhibitions. We are rotating them about twice a year now. But this is a special pairing of a very important conversation to open a very important and special exhibition. How many of you have already been through the gallery to see To Be Sold, Enslaved Labor and Slave Trading in the Antebellum South? I see quite a few hands. As you will know, it is an incredibly moving and very important exhibition that talks about a part of American history that many people would rather not talk about. But we're going to get into it today. And to provide some context for To Be Sold, we are really thrilled to have two special speakers here that you'll get to hear from a little bit later. Today's conversation is intended to be a model for how truth-telling and an openness to difficult conversations about our shared history can create new paths towards healing and racial reconciliation. As you listen, we invite you to consider how personal history, public memory, and dialogue can help us to reimagine our shared future. This will not be an easy conversation to have, nor is To Be Sold something that can be viewed casually. I encourage each of you who are here today to listen with an open mind, to receive with an open heart, and to channel whatever you may feel into positive action, whether it be on a personal, interpersonal, or societal level. All right, this show started with a conversation with a good friend, a person who's become a good buddy of mine. And he brought the idea for this show to us, and I can't thank him enough for it because it was indeed a very, very good idea. He happens to be the executive director for the Partners in Racial Justice. Please welcome Dwayne Rayner as he comes forward and gives some comments.
Well, thank you, Tamika, and thank you all for coming. My name is Dwayne Rayner. I represent Partners in Racial Justice. The purpose of that organization is to engage in creative ways and means of bringing all people together for the purpose of racial justice, healing, and unity. And we had a wonderful relationship with the African American Research Library, and not only to use art as a platform to understand history, but also to engage in meaningful and elevated conversations. So this is our second actually exhibition we've had here. We had one a few years ago. It was called The Color of Money. And that exhibition was about how the Confederate currency was used as propaganda to elevate slavery to something that was not so bad, as you might have heard in history recently. They put enslaved individuals on the currency of the pre-war South, pre-Civil War South. And it was always these happy individuals who were on there, And I remember being in school. I'm actually native here in South Florida. I remember being in school thinking, all the pictures they show, and the very few in the history books when I was in school, I graduated in 1985, very few showed any real pictures of enslaved individuals. And if they did show them, they were happy out there picking cotton. Some of you might remember that. So art has a powerful means. It's a way of engaging us, not just our minds, but our visceral reaction. It evokes feelings and emotions. It allows us to feel things and see things. So the purpose of this exhibition, as with the other, is to help us to really fully understand as much as possible what it was like and what hasn't been taught to us as well in history. Just to give a little bit of background, we have an ongoing dialogue series. So this is not just an exhibition. It's that, like I said, it's a purpose for meaningful conversations. So every month we have a dialogue. people from all backgrounds come together. And as Dr. Hobbs mentioned, it's not an easy conversation because people bring their own perspectives. But to talk about how we can use this as an understanding for healing and a focus going forward, because we know we can't change the past, but we can't move forward by ignoring it either. So the goal here is to acknowledge our history, to recognize where we've come from. And I'll just give a few factual elements from our conversations recently that was really surprising to people. You know, of the 12.5 million enslaved individuals who came to this country during the transatlantic slave trade, only about 400,000, maybe 500, came to what is known as the United States. The rest went to Brazil, to Central America, to the Caribbean. And the slave trade was abolished by 1808 in this country. So between 1808 and 1860, this country grew from 400,000 enslaved individuals to over 4 million, tenfold. Why was that? When the rest of the world had already abolished it. So that's a question to ask, because when we look at history, there's a Latin quote. When I was in college, I studied classical literature. It says, "Happy is he who knows the causes of things," right? And my son would ask me sometimes if we're talking about history, why didn't they fight back? You know, because we have friends from the Caribbean. Oh, we were warriors. We fought. You know, but here's the reality. There's something to think about as we look at these individuals as humans, not as chattel. Of those 400,000, by the way, everyone in this room, especially those who are from this country, are connected to them, right? We're all descendants of those 400,000 to 500,000 enslaved individuals. But the reality is, in Haiti, they were outnumbered 10 to 1. In Jamaica, 8 to 1, you know? So they had resistance movements that were moving people to say, okay, I have a desire for freedom, the very foundation in which this country was founded, right? If you all remember, we studied this in history very clearly. Give me liberty or give me death. That was Patrick Henry and the founding of this country. So these folks, these enslaved folks who brought from transatlantic slave trade were not just docile. They were fighting back, but there was a suppression of that. And when you're a small minority, you know, in Haiti, in Jamaica, and other parts of Brazil, they made a dominant force. So resistance forced the emancipation a lot sooner. Think about that. So we're like the lost tribe over here, 400,000, now we grew to 4 million through the domestic slave trade. So when you walk through the gallery, as you look at this, especially look at the little girl in a dress, and look at how families were sold, don't look at them only as how they were treated, but the resilience that can be inspired from what they had to go through, the resilience that our own descendants had to go through. You know, the fact that right after the slave trade started, they had to engage in laws to keep people suppressed. Some of you know them. One of the most profound ones was the anti-literacy laws. So it was a crime to teach Black folk how to read. It was a crime to own property. And if you were, white folks were flogged and fined. You know, so you can see how this systematic oppression was there. It was systemized, and it became much more systemized after the invention of the cotton gin. I won't go into a whole lot of detail because there's a lot I can share, but we have these dialogues every month where we talk about this and we talk about the personal impact it has on us and what does slavery have to do with me. But I'll say this, slavery was on the decline in this country before 1789 when the cotton gin was created, because the need for enslaved individuals was supposed to be reduced, but because of the economic benefits and the Industrial Revolution and the financing that came from the North, we actually needed more and more enslaved individuals. So I'm gonna stop here because I see Tamika right here. I'm not gonna try to preach, but I will say that I want to thank the African American Research Library for this opportunity, and I invite all of you to look on the schedule because every month we have these dialogues, and it's made much more rich by a diverse group of people as we engage in this. But not only to talk about what happened, but to talk about what we will do going forward. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dwayne, for your partnership. A couple of the recognitions I'd like to make before I move on. We are able to continue to do this work, and that's one of the questions that I get. How is our surviving in this climate? How are you able to continue and do what you're able to do? I'm able to continue. Nothing has really changed for us here. We're continuing to fulfill our mission of celebrating and preserving and interpreting the history of African descended people without interruption. And that happens because of the support of our fearless leader, Allison Grubbs, who is director of Broward County Library System. Thank you, Allison, for your leadership. I see my assistant manager sitting right behind her. I called you Anitra King. I hope keeps things going here in the building. This program series would not be possible without the support of some very special people. I'm speaking, of course, of our members of the Friends of Arlick. Our president, Lawando Wright, I believe is in the room. Lawando, here you are. Please stand. Other members of the Friends of Arlick in the room, raise your hand. Yes, thank you so much for your continued support of this institution and everything that you do to make this program series possible. I want to acknowledge specifically Wayne and Lucretia Weiner for their support of this Cultural Conversation series. It takes money to make these events happen, and we thank you so much for your support. Okay, let's get into it. I want to begin by introducing the two panelists that I'll be engaging with this afternoon. The first is Senator Mia McLeod, who is an 8th generation South Carolinian and a public servant who advocates for justice and equity. As the first woman and African American to represent Senate District 22 in South Carolina, and the first Black woman to run for governor of South Carolina, Mia has worked across party lines to address systemic issues such as healthcare access, education equity, domestic violence, and criminal justice reform. Mia is a Liberty, Diversity, and Education Fellow, Policy Fellow, whose leadership has earned national recognition, including the prestigious 2023 John F. Kennedy Profile in Courage Award. Her family business, founded in 1914, plays a role in her ancestral discovery and reconciliation story. She's also the proud mother of 2 sons. Everyone, Senator Mia McLeod. And next, we also have with us Margaret Seidler. Margaret is a retired leadership and development consultant, author, and native Charlestonian whose life was upended after a late-in-life DNA test revealed distant cousins of African descent. During the course of her research, Margaret uncovered 3 generations of slave traders in her family, including William Payne, who brokered the sale of more than 9,000 human beings. Her research has led to historical markers in Charleston and the publication of her book, Payne-ful Business, Charleston's Journey to Truth, which has won both the 2025 Phyllis Wheatley National Book Award and the 2025 South Carolina Governor's Award in the Humanities. Please welcome Margaret and Mia to the stage. All right. Thank you both for being here. You've come quite a way from Columbia, South Carolina, and Charleston, South Carolina. I want to welcome you to Fort Lauderdale and specifically welcome you to the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. It is indeed an honor to have you here and to have this very interesting conversation. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So we're here today, as I mentioned, to provide context for our new exhibition, To Be Sold, Enslaved Labor and Slave Trading in the Antebellum South, which is based on your book, Margaret, Payne-ful Business. And it's in that book that you document your ancestors and their legacy as slave traders, which was something of a surprise to you. As I mentioned, one of their companies, Payne & Sons, you can see their ads throughout the gallery, were responsible for the sale of over 9,000 individuals between, what I saw was between 1793 and 1833. But for the past 7 to 8 years, you've been on a journey because all of this was unknown to you when you started to do this research. And I find it really interesting that this is something that I think personally, most people would turn away from and try to keep these skeletons in the closet. We know that nationally, there are people in very important places who would rather we not talk about slavery, but you made the decision not to push it away, but to embrace it, to tell it, and to be very public about it. I would like for you to take a minute and tell this audience about your journey to discovering the truth about your ancestors.
Well, Dr. Hobbs, thank you so much for inviting us down to Florida. Of all the states, this would be the one I'd want to come to the most. Outside of South Carolina, that is. I was 65 years old when a friend of mine called me, and she was all upset because she'd taken a DNA test and she had a health marker that was extraordinarily concerning. And so I had taken a similar test on 23andMe probably back 2012. So as soon as I got off the phone commiserating with her, I quick looked at my results again, and there was a message that had been sitting there on the 23andMe website waiting for quite almost a year from a cousin who didn't look like me. And I was really excited. And so the cousin wanted to connect, and I did. And they asked me to find their ancestry and our common cousins or common family, because they couldn't go past the 1870s census when most people of African descent were given surnames for the first time. And I hadn't really ever been interested in genealogy or history. I'm from the Grubers. How many of y'all have heard of the Grubers from Charleston? No one, right? They were working class people. My grandmother, Bama, had an 8th grade education. My grandfather had a 3rd. And so I had never really, if you're from Charleston, if you're not a Ravenel or a Pinckney or a Middleton, I was just raised that your family didn't matter. And so for the first time, I went back to my grandmother's family Bible. My grandmother lived to be 100 and died in 1983, so it had been sitting there for over 30 years. And I started looking up these names of people that were written in the Bible, and I thought they were all from New York. And let me just say this about being a Charlestonian, born and raised there in the 50s and 60s, that we were taught not to like people from up north. I mean, that's how we were raised. There was a real resentment about the war, and they still hadn't gotten over it. And so that's what we were taught. So I'd never looked up those cousins' names. So I went on Google search, right, just a web browser, and up pops these names of people who said they were in New York, and lo and behold, they had been in Charleston, had moved to Charleston because it was such a wealthy place in 1758. And so I found online in the archives that my 5th great-grandfather was a wealthy, well-educated merchant in Charleston on Bay Street. He brought a lot of Madeira wine from Spain, and also hundreds of captive Africans through the port of Charleston. And I was devastated. And I don't know how many of you know the psychological term, a primal scream, where it comes from your toes and it comes out, it eventually comes out your mouth and you can't close your mouth. You just can't stop screaming. And that was really my response, because in Charleston, we never talked about slavery. It was just history. And I just always knew that those people on the plantations, that those aristocratic families were the ones that were involved, and that my family had nothing to do with it. So until I was 65, I honest to goodness believed, even though I grew up next to McLeod Plantation, not related to you. I checked that out. I thought I was exempt, right? I thought I was exempt.
Mm-hmm. That's a really powerful story of discovery and learning something that you didn't learn. And I think it's important to point out that this is no small thing. I could easily see people asking questions, why bring you down from South Carolina all the way down here to South Florida to tell this story? But it is a national story, a story of national import. When we think about Charleston, scholars have referred to Charleston as the Ellis Island for African Americans, right? Of the 500,000 people that we can trace that were brought and sold in these United States, 40% of them were sold through Charleston, right? So this is no small deal at all. And so to make this discovery, and not just your ancestor was not just any old slave trader. He was the largest. He was
That
the
was
busiest.
his son-in-law.
His son-in-law.
His son-in-law, William Payne.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So really quite remarkable that you do that. Now you mentioned in your book, because I think another question that comes to my mind is why? Yes, you made this discovery about your family, but to do what you've done, to continue the research, to publish a book now, an award-winning book, congratulations on that. That was not an easy thing to do. You really put this out here, and you've done the work of even researching and trying to track down the families of the people who were bought and sold. You talk about your desire to take ownership and to do the work of trying to improve relationships. How did you come to that decision?
I don't know how many of you have ever realized in life that somehow you were sort of destined for something you didn't know. And so since 1992, I worked in leadership development in corporations and then on my own consultancy that was national. And my specialty was conflict resolution and working in community polarizing issues. And that's what I did for a living, right? And I did it until 5.5 years ago when I retired. And so just imagine that you're helping people throughout this country be the best they can be, to be the most authentic, to bring their full selves to complex situations. And then you find yourself in the middle of it. So for me, I mean, I'm so glad you asked this question. So for me, it wasn't ever even a thought, you know, am I gonna hide this like probably a lot of people who look like me might choose to do, or share it and use it for something purposeful and useful and meaningful for everybody in this country, because I believe that this is, as you said, while the book might be Charleston's journey to truth, it is in fact America's journey to truth and America's story. And one of the things that I know about working in conflict resolution, and I mean, that is what I did for a living, is that if you avoid conflict, you might beat it down for a while, but guess what? Y'all, how many of y'all ever played whack-a-mole, right? You whack the mole down and what happens? Pops up somewhere else. And so my educated view, I'm not a historian by training, but my educated view is that if we don't face with compassion what the past was, we will never be able to be strong together as a country. And y'all might say, well, thank y'all. And it's groups like you that Mia and I and many others are working so hard to try and reach, to give you the steps where in your own circle of influence you can make a difference. Because those every single, like you're making a big difference, Dr. Hobbs. And let's have a round of applause for Dr. Hobbs. Right? This young woman, and she is much younger than I am, she's the one who said yes. And guess what she could have just as easily said? No. So what a difference you are making by allowing us to be here today. So I'll get off my soapbox, and although I can get back on it.
That definitely, and again, for the work that you've been doing, very courageous, very purposeful. I want to switch now and talk to you, Senator McLeod, and I want to start because there's kind of the before story, and then there's this woman who reaches out to you with this very interesting story that she's going to bring to your attention. I would like for you to talk about your understanding of your family history before you even met Margaret, because you come from quite an accomplished group of people.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having us. I echo everything that Margaret has said. Thank all of you for being here this afternoon to hear from us about how we came together. So my dad, I'm a daddy's girl, not as much as my sister Tracy, but I am a daddy's girl. And my dad passed in 2011. And that was extremely hard for me, for us, for our family. And he was our family historian. And he always said, you need to know your people. You come from good stock. He told me that all the time. As a kid, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, okay, well, I come from good stock. Great, wonderful. And I was on to the next thing. And he always stopped me and said, hey, Mia, you need to know this about your great-great-grandfather, Joseph W. Morris. Our family has, before I get to what our family business is, Joseph W. Morris was quite accomplished for his time and for our time. My dad believed that he was born free. He wasn't. I didn't know that until Margaret's research revealed that. The reason that my dad believed that he was born free is because when I was in high school, before I even went to the University of South Carolina as an undergraduate, and before I went to the University of South Carolina for law school, a professor at the law school reached out to my dad and told him that he had information to share about his great-grandfather, Joseph W. Morris. Turns out he had a lot of information to share, and my dad was super excited. He drove from Bennettsville, my hometown, to Columbia, South Carolina, and met with this professor and discovered that, or thought he discovered that his great-grandfather was born free. He also, I think he already knew that Joseph W. Morris was president of Allen University, one of the historically Black universities in Columbia, South Carolina, in the state of South Carolina. And he also knew that Joseph W. Morris was a scholar, a mathematician, a professor of languages. I mean, wow. He was like a beast, even for that time. And so he came back really excited about his discoveries. I think he was able to share some other things with the professor. And he showed me, some artifacts and things that they exchanged. And he was super excited about that. So my great-grandfather's son, Joseph H.W. Morris, started our family funeral home in 1914. He had been in the funeral business in Columbia, South Carolina, and moved our family, for reasons unknown to me, moved our family to Bennettsville. And he started our family brand of funeral homes. And I say that because his brother, once he founded Morris Funeral Home of Bennettsville in 1914, his brother founded Morris Funeral Home of Laurinburg, North Carolina, which is maybe 17 miles away from Bennettsville, South Carolina, in the 1930s, I believe. And then his son, Joseph W. Morris Jr., founded Morris Funeral Home in Cheraw, South Carolina. So when Margaret reached out, she didn't reach out to me. I don't think she even knew that she would connect with me in terms of this. We didn't know each other. She reached out to the funeral home because it was the Morris name that came up. By that time, my dad was deceased, and I told my sister Tracy, who is here with me today, that I was going to return this lady's phone call because my dad would want me to do that. And I did, and I thought, I'll have a conversation, maybe find out what the connection is, what the family connection is, and keep it moving. At the time I was serving in the Senate, I recently came out of the Senate, South Carolina Senate, in November of last year. But at that time, it was 2020, and I was serving in the Senate and had a lot going on. And so I reached back out to Margaret, and we talked for 2 hours that day? Never discovered at that point, I don't even think she knew what the family connection was. We just talked. And hindsight is 2020. I think my biggest takeaway from that day and that time is that I'm so grateful that I took the time to reach back out to her. That's not something that I can say I always would have done under those circumstances, but I knew that my dad would want me to learn whatever the connection was. And before we even got to that, we got started at least to hear each other. And I was intentional about listening and actually hearing what this woman I didn't know had to say. And we talked about a number of things that day. It wasn't all about the family connection. It wasn't a lot about the family connection, actually. We talked about life. We talked about the things that were happening politically. We talked about the fact that she used to work and live in Columbia and worked in the House of Representatives, and I had just left the House of Representatives and was in the Senate. So we started getting to know each other that day and realized that we had a number of things in common. And I'll stop right there because I don't want to go too far into the story, but that was the beginning of our connection.
Got you. A beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so impressed by your family history in and of itself. But there's always more to know. And I just want to recap. So this is a 23andMe DNA test that let Margaret, you know that you had Black cousins that you were not aware of.
And they're from St. Augustine.
From St. Augustine, Florida. And then after you find out more about your own personal history and the Payne and Company, Payne and Sons, you then begin to work with a genealogist to try to do what you could to find out about all of these thousands of individuals who were sold. And the only person, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were able to track down is sitting next to you.
And that's what's so exciting. We put up, as you mentioned in the introduction, we put up 2 historical markers now on Broad Street, which is the historical business street in Charleston. And when we got a private marker on the building where my family had been selling people, that I had no idea we owned the building. The current owners let us do it. And so we had ordered the marker. It had to be built in a foundry in Philadelphia, and we had to wait about 8 weeks. And so I thought I was gonna, quote, feel better once we got the okay, and the College of Charleston was our academic sponsor. Someone asked me earlier when I was out today, all this is source documented, and it said grace over by some pretty powerful historians. So I decided I needed to apologize for somebody. So this genealogist said, well, if you can't find anything from directly your family name, just look at names around William Payne. And so I looked at the name Josiah Payne, who's one of his sons, who also was in the slave trade business. And you didn't know I was bringing this. And I found this book online and ordered it, called Black Slave Owners in South Carolina, because Josiah Payne's name was in it. And in it, it had the name Josiah Payne, and it said that Josiah had sold some people to Joseph Morris. And so finally, we had a last name. So we had been unable to find anybody else because we didn't have a last name. But what would happen that I didn't know about, and this book was written in the 80s by a graduate student, okay? That oftentimes free people of color, or they could be called free Black people, they were called both back then in the early 1800s, they would have money, and so they would actually buy their families from enslavers. And so that is, in fact, what happened to the Morris family. So when I first contacted Mia, I knew that we had a connection through Josiah Payne. What I didn't realize, and Mia was getting ready to run for governor, and I just wasn't going to tell her this during the campaign, because this is so awful. Josiah Payne, my third great-grandfather, had sold off Grace's, who was the woman, Grace, your third great-grandmother, had sold her off away from her 2 children in January of 1849. And so Mr. Morris comes in and buys his 2 girls, Caroline and Rosanna, and Grace, her 3rd great-grandmother, gets sold to this guy, William B. And so for 2 more years, William B. owns Grace, and Grace has a child. What's your great-great-grandfather's name? John or Joseph? Joseph has Joseph W. Morris. And so it's like, when I looked on their website, they had this big page on history. And I was like, oh, this is so great. These people are interested in history. Before I emailed them, and it said that he was born free. And I went, uh-oh. Because I've got paperwork.
Shows he was born enslaved.
He
Which
was.
is an important point to recognize, and this is something that, as we've been talking about this show, about all of the different features of chattel slavery, that system was born on the bodies of Black women because the laws were defined in such a way that the status of your mother, not the status and name of your father, is what determines your status. So when they talked about the increase from a Black woman, it was talking about any future children that she would have. They would become property of the owner. They would be assigned dollar value. Their labor would have dollar value, and this goes on and on and on again. And so it's incredibly terrible when you talk about the reality of being sold. There was no such thing as legalized marriage under the institution of slavery.
There was no such thing as manumission after 1820 in South Carolina. So even though Mr. Morris bought his children and eventually his wife, Grace, he was unable to free them without an act of the state legislature. So they had to be listed as enslaved on the census, and he had to pay what they called a capitation or head tax on them. And so that was something that Larry Koger, who wrote this book, taught us when we were on a Zoom call with him, that they were called nominal slaves, that they weren't completely free.
And that's an important distinction because there are all types of things that people misinterpret about history. And one of them is about, Black people owned other Black people. Now, there were some people who were free, not born free, but freed by their fathers who may have been slave owners and wealthy and set them up, and they imitated the system in which they found themselves and did own slaves to profit from their labor. But a lot more often is what you're describing, Margaret, where people are simply holding the deed to their loved ones because the law said that if you were freed, you had to leave the state. And that actually goes into the next question I want to pose to the two of you. Part of the reason why we have laws like this is because of the reality of resistance to slavery and these instances of slave rebellion. And in the case of Charleston, South Carolina, one of the famous ones was the Denmark Vesey conspiracy, which some believe we can trace back as being hatched and thought out at Mother Emanuel in Charleston. So as a historian, I knew the name of Mother Emanuel Church for that reason. But on June 17th, in 2015, we all across this country and across this globe came to know it for another reason because of the tragic murder of 9 parishioners in that sanctuary that day. I understand that the two of you have respective connections to Mother Emanuel. I wanted to start with you, Mia, and have you talk about your connection to that church.
So it's because of Margaret's research that I know that. I knew that my great-great-grandfather was AME, and he was, I'm told and learned from my dad that he was big in the AME church.
And let's just take a minute for those who may not know what AME means. It is African Methodist Episcopal. It's a special denomination of the church that was founded by African Americans.
Yes. And so Daddy often reminded me that the Morris family had a connection to, I think it's Bethel AME Church in Columbia, historic church in Columbia. It wasn't until well, let me just back up because I can't really talk about Mother Emanuel without talking about the fact that I knew two of the people who were murdered at Mother Emanuel. One was the youngest because at the time I was serving in the South Carolina House, and I had, because legislators in South Carolina earn a whopping, they call it a salary, but I'll call it what it is, nothing, $10,000 a year. So I work for a living, unlike some of my colleagues in the South Carolina legislature. And one of my clients at the time happened to be Allen University. And I met this bright-eyed young man by the name of Tywanza Sanders. And he came to my office at Allen and told me he wanted to do what I did. And we had a great conversation. And I think about that because I found his number one day a few years after the Mother Emanuel massacre. And I found it in my closet in a bag that I had carried, I guess, during that time. And that was his cell number that he had written down. And we were supposed to reconnect so I could tell him more about what I do. And when I saw that, I just sat in my closet and wept. But on June 17th of 2015, I was headed into the State House because we were there for a special session. And my friend and colleague, Senator Clemente Pinckney, was headed to his car. I saw him in the parking garage. And I joked with him that he was going the wrong way because I was going inside and he was heading towards his car. And he said, I have a big meeting at my church. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, be careful on the road because I knew he was headed to Charleston. And on that particular day, he had a deep voice like my dad. And so I smiled every time I heard him talk because it reminded me of my daddy. And on that day, that was the first and only time that I can remember that we didn't hug because I knew he was rushing. And it made me, after the fact, it made me think about how intentional I plan to be after all of that. And part of that intention was manifested when I returned Margaret's email with a phone call. She left a number, and I was still on a mission to be intentional about listening and hearing people, especially people who don't look like me, because I wanted to understand where the level of hatred that I had seen and felt like I had witnessed so up close and personal as it related to Mother Emanuel, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and a host of other young Black men and women who were murdered, who continue to be murdered. And so I reached back out to Margaret, and she said that she did not tell me, and we didn't talk about the connection. By the time I ran for governor by the time I announced that I was running for governor in 2021, I didn't realize that I would be the first Black woman to ever announce or run for governor in the state of South Carolina. And what Margaret's research, the fact that she was willing to share everything that she learned. So we talked countless times between the time that I initially called her and the time that I discovered that her ancestors had enslaved mine. We had had so many conversations about family, about life, about politics, about people, about race, about just about everything. And I did not really know how to feel in that moment. I don't know what I even expected. I guess when you hear something like that, whether you expect it or not, it's tough. And it just reminded me, though, that Margaret didn't know, she's not responsible for what her ancestors did. Let me get that out of the way. B, she didn't know what she was going to get when she reached out to our funeral home. She didn't know who she was going to get when she reached out to the funeral home. And I admire people who have courage, even if I disagree with them. Even if, courage, to have the kind of courage that it took for her to make that, to send that email was, that spoke volumes about who she is as a person. And I can respect that. At that point, it didn't matter as much about what the connection was. I just wanted to hear from her what she had to say. And I'm so glad that I did, because her research and her willingness to share it came into my life at a time when I needed it. I needed it. I was running for governor. I was serving in the Senate. And it was, I don't know if you guys know a lot about South Carolina, but I'm not one to hold my tongue. I speak my mind, and I'm a truth teller. And that didn't sit very well with a lot of people. And, some of those people who don't appreciate my approach look like me, and some don't, and that's okay. They don't have to like it, and they don't have to like me, and I'm good with that. What Margaret's research, though, gave me during that time was confirmation that my dad wasn't here to give me. Her research showed me what he meant. When he talked about good stock, he meant the recipe. He meant the blood that runs through my veins. He meant the things that make me me, the things that I had questioned, like, why am I like this? Why can't I just look the other way like my colleagues do? Why can't I just, I want to just coast. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of fighting for people. I'm tired of fighting my people. I'm tired. It was so affirming in so many ways, because one thing that I did know about my great-great-grandfather was that he was nominated to serve in the South Carolina House in the 1800s. Yeah. And I served in the South Carolina House. Yeah. And when I got there, I thought, okay, there was so much. I had worked in and around state government for a minute, so I knew it was dysfunctional, right? I knew they were crazy. And I ran anyway, because I have two sons who are now young adults. They weren't adults then. And it was important to me, that they see someone who looked like them. And to know that they could do whatever they put their minds to do. And to know that that good stock that blood runs through their veins too.
Wow.
And so when I was running for governor and Margaret shared her research with me, it told me that every question that I had had before about why I can't let things go when people don't have courage, when they lie, which is a lot in South Carolina, when they don't show up for others, when they, when they are selfish and taking up space instead of actually doing the work that would move everybody forward. Those are the gifts that I received from this woman because she chose to share a history that wasn't flattering to her family.
So let me go back to the Mother Emanuel piece. So one of the things that I helped you learn was that
We're married.
your second
I
great
forgot about that.
aunt, Caroline Morris Fevers, got married at Mother Emanuel. And I actually was able to trace the house where they lived on Ash Street in Charleston, and I took Mia on a tour of it. So what's amazing is I had been elected to serve on the Charleston International Airport Board. And there was an African-American state senator, a colleague of yours, Marlon Kempson, who was new then. And he called me up one day and he goes, you've worked harder for trying to get this position than anybody else. He didn't know me. He says, I'm gonna give you a chance. And so I got on the airport board and it was way out of my league. I mean, these people were serious politicians. There was only one thing, and my husband Bob is here somewhere. He says, there's one legacy that you have from serving on that airport board, and that is they ask you to chair the task force to build a tribute to the Mother Emanuel massacred and the survivors in the airport that is still there today in the Central Hall. So we worked with Tawanza Sanders' mother, Felicia, and Polly Shepard, the survivors, to actually design it. And when I found out about the DNA test, my husband and I were actually going to another downtown historic AME church. We had decided that we didn't want to we wanted to integrate. We didn't want people to be separate on Sundays when I found that out. So I figured that probably most of the people that we were going to church with had probably been brought over here in the transatlantic trade or sold in the domestic trade by my family. And I will tell you that our friends at this AME church really helped us get through it. And Polly Shepard was at that church too. So
Wow.
a lot of trust, considering this is just a few years after the massacre, right?
And I've had a chance to see that installation. I was in Charleston just a few weeks ago. The annual meeting for the Association of African American Museums was there. The backdrop for that meeting was the International African American Museum. I don't know how many of you've been, but you definitely should put it on your agenda to go. And part of the reason why people thought it would be fitting to have that particular museum in that city is because of the history of slave trading in Charleston. So just incredibly powerful. And Senator McLeod, wow, the connection to the victims is, yes, that just really resonates. And just so much terrible history in the past, the distant past and the more recent past. I want to come to you, Mia, because as a politician, I stand corrected. As a public servant, there is a difference. There is often, right, this debate between how we move forward, right? Do we change policies and change laws, or do we really need to stop and do the work of trying to educate people and change their minds and change their hearts? As a retired legislator and retired public servant, I don't know if you ever retired from that, have you found a way to balance those two approaches? What do you say, what do you think when you look out at the political landscape today?
Ooh,
when it
scary.
concerns these things?
We are, unfortunately, being very intentional about going backwards. What I've seen is that when I think about what Margaret has done and where we are as a state and as and a nation with regard to our public policy. It's not enough. It's not enough to even just acknowledge the harm, the things that have, the truth. It's not enough to just acknowledge it. We have to act. We have to act intentionally. We have to act at this point aggressively to make sure that we don't repeat the sins of the past. If you think about what is being said and done at a national level, and I know in South Carolina, we've been anti just about everything. I mean, we're anti-books, we're anti-CRT, we're
I think
anti-DEI.
the mic,
Oh.
lost the sound on the mic.
Thank you. I didn't even notice. We are anti-everything, and we're moving in a direction that is not going to benefit any of us. It's not enough to just acknowledge the truth and the history, and these are facts. Like, we have to get to a place where it's not about anybody's comfort. I say it all the time, nobody cares if I'm comfortable. Like, that's not what this is about. So there has to be a balance. I think your question is so on point because we can't continue to pay lip service. I'm gonna go back to Mother Emanuel for 1 minute because I went to my colleague and friend's funeral and stood with then President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, and others. But one of my most vivid memories of that day was sitting, my sons and I sat with my colleagues. And so many of my colleagues who were there did not look like me. And they had served with Clem. And they were there, of course, because it was such a heinous, unconscionable act and such a stain on not just South Carolina, but our country as a whole. And to see them genuinely look the part. And what I mean by that is they looked remorseful. They looked genuinely upset and devastated at what had happened. And then when we got to the State House, though, when we got back into session, somehow all of that dissipated. And South Carolina is one of 2 states in the nation that still does not, after all of that, still doesn't have a hate crimes law. That too is intentional. And so there has to be a balance. We can't afford to say, oh, this is so wrong, hatred is wrong. We need to do more. I've had so many friends and well-meaning colleagues, friends, community members, what can I do? What should we be doing differently? And my answer is always the same. Have courage. Not just the courage to acknowledge, but the courage to act. Because you can take action in any space that you get to occupy. You don't have to have a seat to take a stand. You don't have to be seated in the South Carolina House or the South Carolina Senate or in Congress or in the United States Senate. I mean, there is something that everybody in this room can do to make a difference. The power of one is real. We just don't use it. And so for true transformation to take place, we have to be intentional about not just acknowledging the truth, but acting to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And no, I mean, there's no one political party that's going to do that for us, obviously. There's no one political person that's going to do that for us. We have to do it. And we have to take ownership of who we are, individually and collectively, and move in a direction that is consistent with who we say we are.
Thank you for that. I'm going to pivot now and come back to Margaret, and so we can talk a little bit more about the exhibition, because we talked about your journey to a lot of things, but we do want to kind of contextualize what people have seen and will continue to see in our gallery. But as we do that, I do want to let you know that we're going to open it up for questions. There is a microphone here, so if you know you want to ask something either of Senator McLeod or Ms. Seidler, please percolate on that, and we'll be calling for those. But Margaret, yes, would you talk to us about these paintings that are part of the exhibition?
So I want everyone to know that I wrote a leadership book in 2008, and I love speaking. I don't like writing, and I said I would never do it again. And then my white and my black friends were saying, well, you're the only one that's ever come out with an honest story like this. You've got to use it for the greater good. And so a team of us came together, historians, deeds researchers, all kinds of people, the libraries. My God, Charleston County Public Library has played such a role in this research. But the biggest thing is Chuma here. Can y'all see Chuma?
Did Chuma make it?
Raise your hand, Chuma. I can't see out there. Is he here?
Right there.
Where is he?
Right here.
Don't be humble. So Chuma Bukike is a longtime friend of ours in Charleston. And when he knew that I had these ads, he represents artists. He has an art gallery in our city market called Chuma Gullah Gallery. And he had me meet with this artist who's actually exhibited down here before, John W. Jones, who did the exhibition Confederate Currency, the Color of Money, back in 2021. And he got the two of us to meet, and the three of us met at the South Carolina room in the public library, and we just started looking at the ads that I have. And I have 1,100 of these that are source documented about my family selling people. And we sat there really kind of scratching our heads, talking about what we might do together, and all of a sudden Chuma says, John, I think you could paint these people that are described in these ads. And I was like, wow, what a great idea. And so I don't know if you met Mr. Jones when he was here back in 2021. I'm 73, he's 75. He is the most humble person, just about the most humble person I've ever met. And so what he did from February of 2023 to September or October of 2023 is we took selected ads. We had the historians help us with the research to make sure that everything that you see that has replicated in his paintings that humanize the people that were being sold are historically accurate. Everything in this book has been said grace over by the historians that you'll see in the book. We chose this particular ad. It's the back of the Aiken Rat House, which is a house museum in downtown Charleston, so that this is undeniably it's not like some imaginary place. It is a place where today they take people on tours of where the enslaved worked and lived. So what Mr. Jones did was he took, and the publisher said I could only, when we changed the book contract to say that we were gonna have art, right, because I wasn't planning on have art, they said, well, you can have 20 paintings in the book. So I submitted 34 and didn't say anything different, and it got published with it. So what's amazing is that Mr. Jones, and I call him Mr. Jones because he's never said call him John, and I really, if you read the book, or say when you read the book, because there are 80 copies here thanks to Pyramid Books that's come down for this today, which is an African-American owned bookstore.
Yes.
Is that he humanizes these amazing people who are described, and he also shows the skill sets of the enslaved. And I don't know how many of you know what ASALH is, the Association for the African American Study of Life and History. And their theme this year nationally is African American labor, right? And like when I was growing up in Charleston, we just thought enslaved people picked cotton and planted rice. And this is just not true. I mean, you will see all the skill sets. Basically, the enslaved, and I'm probably not telling most of you something you don't already know, built our communities and country. I mean, completely. They were the artisans and the craftspeople and the craftsmen that built this. And one of the things that I did in the back of the book is I put all 1,100 newspaper ads categorized, so anybody who wants to go look them up online can see the ads, so they know every single one of the 1,100 ads is real. And because of my African American cousins, I put all the names, that they had first names in the ad, or they had the person who owned them. I put their name, so that eventually, like genealogy right now is really growing in terms of what people can find. I mean, leaps and bounds ever since I got started 7 years ago. Eventually, I believe that people of African descent will be able to find their ancestors through this book. And for me, that is why I started this whole journey, because I think everybody deserves to know their people, right? I mean, that's what your daddy believed, right? Everybody deserves to know their people, and to think about how hard the enslaved worked, and that they carried on, and they not only survived, they thrived. They thrived in spite of what they suffered. And so this story tells their story in a way that is respectful and humanizing. Mr. Jones only had 2 rules. No shackles, no auction block. Everything in here is absolutely a depiction of these amazing people actually living their lives. And when you get the book, I want you to remember this page number, page 107. That's the page with the ask. The book has an ask. And it's an ask of people who are of European descent, or primarily European descent, like myself, and what we can do within our own personal sphere of influence to take action, whether it's building a relationship, maybe it's going to space where you are not the majority. And then there's also a few bullet points for people of primarily African descent. And there's things that we ask you to do as well, because my mother always used to say, darling, it takes 2 to get in a tango, and it takes 2 to fix it. Y'all get me on that? Mm-hmm. So I can't do it alone. Mia can't do it alone. The reason we're here this weekend is because we believe that we can be role models for what's possible in terms of relationship. And I would say that Mia and I have more in common than we have in difference in many ways. I mean, not to say that we've had the same life experience. We have a lot in common.
Thank you for saying that. And I have to say, like, being in this position, people approach me with things all the time. So when Dwayne came and I talked with Dave, and it was like, okay, yeah, this sounds good. Let me look at it. And Margaret offered, let me send you a copy of my book, Payne-ful Business. I was like, okay, this will really help me. When I got that book and I started flipping through those pages, it took my breath away. What you have put together. And, you know, I'm not one who is easily brought to emotion, I like to think. But I have to say, preparing for this conversation today, watching the paintings be put up in our gallery, it almost brings me to tears as I walk through each time, because it's done some very important things. As a historian, I'm used to seeing the print ads. Those are not unfamiliar to me. But these paintings, what John Jones has done to humanize these individuals, number one, deepens and just makes you stop and think about what this human must have been experiencing, not being in control of their own body, not being able to control the fate of their children, not being able to stay bonded with the man or woman that they consider to be their spouse. And knowing that someone survived that in order for me to be here. There's a critical confrontation that happens through this art. The other piece that is just as impressive, as you pointed out, is the variety of the labor that they are performing and of the labor for which they're not profiting. There's an enslaved pastry maker that you'll see in the gallery. There's an enslaved chocolatier. There's, everything from feeding babies to growing rice, to making cabinets, caulking ships and boats. If there was work to be done, Black people did it. And they did it with a level of ingenuity and talent and skill that they ought to have profited from, but never were able to profit from themselves. That money was extracted from them. The price on their bodies was extracted from them. So there were people who were enriched. And then the other side of that question is, what did we lose in terms of heritage and birthright? And when we talk about the wealth gap that exists between Black and white people today, folks don't want to talk about that. But part of the reason that it exists is what you're going to see in that gallery on the wall, is because of what has been taken from our enslaved ancestors. And so there's quite a bit to contend with in that work. I want to take a pause at this point and open the floor to any questions anyone may have. You can come forward. There's a microphone here. I see a gentleman coming. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
First thing, this is absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much. My name is William Nix. My ancestors came from Barnwell, South Carolina. And we've been trying to find, and once we'd gone to see Roots a long time ago, I immediately went to Barnwell to try to find my ancestors and found documents on them. I have two questions. The first one has to do with you two. I also noticed when you talked about Joseph Morris being your great-great from Allen University.
Yes.
Allen University came from Payne Institute.
It sure did.
Is
I meant
there
to
a
say
connection?
that. Yes.
Not related.
Not that you found.
They are not related.
Oh, okay. All right.
I have done a lot of research on AME Bishop Daniel Alexander Payne.
All righty.
His daddy was London Payne from North Carolina, a free man who moved to Charleston. Daniel Alexander Payne was in Charleston the same time as William Payne. William Payne came straight from Ireland in 1786. So they are not related. So trust me, the Payne Institute that became Allen University. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question.
Okay. From the Nix side, I did research, and there were two Nixes that came into South Carolina about 17 something, and one stayed in South Carolina, or whether the other went to Alabama. The book that you showed us earlier, is that one that I can look at and try to find my ancestors in?
Are you talking about the
Black slave owners. This is a book that just talks the names of people who were African American or of African descent who owned people. Is that what you're asking?
Oh, no.
No,
Okay.
this is only people. This is a listing of people who were of African descent who owned people.
Okay, so from your research that you've done with what your grandfathers did, can you trace back to certain plantations?
I cannot. Yes, there are people who can.
Okay.
And it would be, you can be in contact with the South Carolina Historical Society. They've got a lot of information online. They have a lot of papers, particularly plantation papers.
Okay.
And so you can find a lot of that. So, and just know that there's the Afro-American Genealogy and Historical Society. You can find them online. And I would also recommend that you write this name down, Robin Foster, who is an African-American genealogist, and she only charges like $20 an hour. And she's the one who helped me find the Morris family. So go for it.
Let me brag on my own family. My sister was first African-American to be head of the Georgia Genealogical Society.
Oh, right.
We get into trouble because she says, you got to show me the data because I'm an oral historian. So I'm looking for the data.
It's got to be data sourced.
I just want to invite you to, we have an ongoing genealogy series here at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center that is run by our Adult Information Services Supervisor, Dr. Ramona LaRoche. So you can find information on our event site about how you can find us. I think she's doing those monthly.
I should have known you were doing that. Thank you.
Not me, her. She's
Well, thank
she's
you
the
for hosting
expert.
it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there another question from the audience? I think we have someone.
Yeah, I was thinking about like important things to do, given the environment that we're in now, and I don't know if people are aware of the number of police killings. I don't have who they're killing, but it's up. It's up again. It was up last year, about 312 higher, and now this year it should increase again. But it's the environment, it's the rhetoric, it's the talk. I'm a school teacher, and I watch our population of immigrant children coming to school decrease. We only have anecdotal evidence of why, but most likely it's due to fear.
You have a question for our panelists?
I probably don't, except for,
But the microphone is for questions, so I need you to put your question in the form of a question.
Okay, hi, my name is Gina, and I like to write more than talk. So anyway, I come here with a heavy heart because I helped volunteer to open up the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And the heavy heart comes from the fact that we are hearing that anything DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is being looked at by this current administration. So I don't know how many people have visited the museum, but the fact that the first floor of the museum is not a tribute, but is about slavery. So we've been told that that's going to go. So it's very sad. And
Can I ask you about that? Told by who?
well, we're hearing rumors in the press.
Okay.
Okay, so at one time I would say, oh, that's just talk, but it seems like talk becomes reality in this administration. So it's very sad. We put a lot of work into that.
I just like to say there's nothing about DEI in this book.
Good.
Nothing. There's nothing in this book about DEI.
Mm-hmm.
This is a personal story that is source documented, that uses art as a way to help people acknowledge history, harsh realities of history, and to feel more prepared and willing to act on it. So please know, we're not planning
It's
on
beautiful.
this being, that's my training, right? So I mean, I knew it when I wrote it that I had to write it in such a way. The word equity is only in here once, and it's used as sweat equity. And that's the only time the word equity is in
But
there.
we shouldn't have to not include it.
Hey, when
That's
you
the
read the
problem.
book and you
Oh, I
tell me
know.
if it doesn't work, because I believe that I can be strategic
Yes, good.
in how the message gets told so that I don't get swatted down.
Right, okay.
Well, I just want to add something to that, though. In South Carolina, the law that has passed, one of them, bans any books that uses the word slavery or sex. In
Yeah.
South Carolina, the books are being removed. I told you that, I think.
You did not tell me.
Well, I meant to. Um, any books that reference the word slave or slavery or sex
That's
are
very
being removed.
interesting.
Yes.
We'll just be studying
And so
math
it's
in
not-
South Carolina.
Right. And I said that to say we really don't have to reference DEI. I mean, I could get into a whole different conversation about who DEI really benefits,
Oh.
at least in my state.
Of course.
But I won't do that today because now is not the time. But those are the words, they are flagging words.
Oh, okay.
And so any books, even Margaret's book, which is absolutely phenomenal, would be flagged because it mentions the word slave.
Okay, one last thing.
You have, is it answer the question?
How
How
can, okay,
question?
Cowpen, South Carolina. That's where my people are from. Is that near Bennetville?
No.
Cowpens.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think I've heard of Cowpens.
It's up by Spartanburg.
Okay, I was gonna say, I can't remember which region it's.
Cowpens is known for the Revolutionary War.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Well, I'll just pick it up like this, if that's okay.
You can take it off.
I'm trying to do that without, oh, there we go. My name is Bobby Henry. I'm the publisher of the West Side Gazette. That's Broward County's oldest and largest Black-owned newspaper. But trying to understand from what I was listening to and what I read, and you also mentioned to some degree boundaries of you two, how you and the artist, what could be in the book and what, So between you two, how did you honestly have a conversation that from a person who enslaved your people, how did you genuinely have a conversation with that person? Were there boundaries reset, or did you honestly have deep down discussion? Because I know here in Broward County that it's extremely difficult when you begin to have those conversations from an honest standpoint. There seems to be, you get in your place, and I'm a rule over that. So how did you two do that to the degree that you were able to produce that book and to go on tour and put yourselves out front for us to see and perhaps take a liking to what we're seeing? But we want to see the genuine honesty behind this, not necessarily a come to Jesus or kumbaya, but just to have this conversation. And another thing, I think it's unfair for you to moderate. You should have had another moderator. You should have been a part of the panel so we could hear from that perspective.
Yes.
That's my question. That's what I want to do.
So I will just say that Mia and I are examples of two strong South Carolina women. And growing up as women in South Carolina, we were not in first place. Right? Now, she might have been in a place behind me, but neither of us went first. And so when we first met, we had so much in common policy-wise that when she called me and she goes, "Hi, I'm calling about the letter that you wrote to the Morris Funeral Home," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm Mia McLeod," and I went, "You're Mia McLeod?" And I knew exactly who she was, because she is a representative of our people in South Carolina that really represents what I believe in for women. So I already knew who Mia was. So I think I'll let you answer it, Mia. For me, it was like, all rise, Mia McLeod. It was like, oh, I can't wait to get off the phone and tell Janet Alterman, because she loves you. Right? So, I imagine it had to be much harder for you. For me, it was like I knew exactly who you were.
It wasn't that it was hard. It was that it wouldn't have been a priority for me. I'll say that, to reach back out to her, but for the fact that I knew my dad would want me to reach out to her. Now, I think your question though, you want to know, have we had some of the tough conversations? Absolutely. We just had a tough conversation in love. That's how we do it. Because she's not responsible for what her ancestors did. And for me I think the first step for me was having the courage to listen. Because that too takes courage. It took courage for her to reach out and not to know what she was going to get or who she was going to get on the other end, but it also took courage for me to hear.
It took courage for you to call.
It took courage for me to call. Here's the thing though, I think what she was alluding to when she said that we're both strong women, we are. And we just had a conversation, was it last week? What Margaret did was she asked me a question about something that I think I said and she wanted to know more. So we talked through some things because her experience is very different from mine. And there are things that she might not say that I would say all day and not apologize for saying. And so we had that conversation and she was like, I appreciate the fact that you trust me enough to, tell me how you really feel, because I do. And that you can't have, to your point, you can't have a genuine conversation without honesty. And honesty ain't always pretty, right? So if we want to move in a productive and positive direction, we have to be able to just talk.
So that conversation was about the way you say certain things and the way because I'm very clear about my languaging.
Right.
I'm so thoughtful about my languaging. And so,
and I'm not.
And that's okay. And so we decided that this relationship is not about censorship.
Right.
That we can't show up as a team if one person has the upper hand, right? We're all contributing, we're all coming from a place. And that's what the conversation was about.
Yep, and we just had it. So, and you're right. You are so right about that. Like, we want people to know that it's possible. Like, our friendship, our sisterhood is real. I love her. And she loves me.
Yes, I do.
And it's okay. It is okay. And we can have tough conversations and we can disagree, and we do. And we disagree and we talk in love, though, with a willingness to hear and to understand, because it's not about, I'm not trying to change her mind and she's not trying to change my mind. She wants to genuinely understand why I feel the way that I do. And I want to understand why she feels the way that she does and why she is moving in the way that she is, because honestly, I've never seen it. Not from somebody who doesn't look like me. And that is so intriguing and so reassuring, so encouraging for me. And I had to, and I say that openly because it's okay. It's not that I'm speaking ill of people who haven't done what she has done. I hope they will, which is why I'm here. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
So I want to go back to page 107. And on the bullets that are for people of primarily African descent, this is what you embody. I want you to know that Mia McLeod is filled with grace. She is filled with grace. And she came to that conversation in December of 2019, December 2020. Filled, she calls it listening intentionally. I'm calling it filled with grace. And she, because of the grace that she brought to the table, because of her fine upbringing, she was able to make space for our shared story in her life and to be the bigger person for it, to say, I'm going to absorb it, I'm going to use it with you, Margaret, in partnership for the greater good. And that's where we are today. So it is because you're filled with grace.
All right, we have time for one last question because we got some other stuff to get to.
Yes, we do. Hello and good afternoon. My name is Sayesha Delaveau. I'm the founder and CEO of Equal Path Solutions. We're an educational consultancy focused on closing the access gap to higher education and resources. Now, I would have loved to see some of my teenagers in this room because I think it's just a very invaluable conversation. And I think as I work with youth and I work with young people who quite literally saw themselves get ripped out of their own schools, unfortunately, and had a desire to learn a lot more about the truth of slavery and the truth of African-American history in this country, I am starting to see a disengagement with history. And I know I grew up in a time where if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. And now they're growing up in a time where they're watching history repeat itself and they don't even know what history was. And so my question is, and in your opinion and what you've experienced, because I think it's fair to say that we all have a general understanding of African-American history in this country, how do we help our youth understand the importance of knowing and seeing this exhibit that I just walked through and why it's so important? How can we help them see and understand that? Because my heart is hurting for these young people's ignorance, and it's quite literally concerning because they're our next generation of voters. So what would be your opinion of how we really help these young people, and what can we do to drive those conversations and understanding?
So I have a lot of young people that are trying to help. We don't have children. I've got a lot of young friends that are trying to help us. And the key to this, they say, is the art. That the art is what makes it accessible rather than it being some, sorry, I'm not an academic, some thick academic historical work, that it's the art. And so I am always looking for young people to help. Like I'm trying to learn Instagram. I'm 73 and I'm trying to learn Instagram. And so I think that's what we do is like, how can we, I think young people, we've got a few in the front row that we could ask, they're experts on being young. I just think you can get a young person to look at a picture a lot easier than a book that's got 600 pages. So how do we take this art and use it? I don't know, which I don't know anybody else's opinion is. That's my simple opinion.
Well, I have to say, first of all, Ms. Delaveau is keeping secrets. Not only is she the founder and executive director of Equal Path Solutions, she is the co-director of the new college readiness hub here at Arlitt called Aspire Academy, where we are going to be, we are going to be guiding 90 10th, 11th, and 12th graders for the next 3 years as a part of a gift that we received from the Helios Education Foundation. She's doing a superb job there. But I want to just say that this place, the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, is positioning itself to stand in the gap. It's why we have this exhibition. It's why we reach out to schools to let educators know that they can bring their kids here. It still is aligned to the state mandated standards for African American history, the things that we have on the wall there. And so we have been encouraged by the conversations we've been having with our school partners around what they can do and bring under the school umbrella. Outside of that, I will say for all of us, with the attacks that are taking place, South Carolina, Florida, all around, for literature that concerns people of African ancestry, that concerns Black history, we have to ask ourselves what we are willing to do. And I think it's the time for a gut check around our values and what we value and where we show up. Because we have the resources here. Upstairs, we are a circulating library, and we have a collection that is especially curated to celebrate Black history and Black culture. Are you using it? Are you coming and checking out our resources here? Are you bringing your kids to our programs? We're going into our 3rd year of our Black History Saturday School, which was created directly in response to some of the stuff that was happening around Black history education here in the state, around the rejection of the AP African American history class. Some of you remember that. Each Saturday, October through June, here at Arlitt, families can come and receive a quality Black history lesson for their families. That's something that we've done intentionally to try to fill the gap. We are, in essence, a blank canvas for your ideas, for the resources. We are a gathering place where people can come together. We don't have to wait for anyone to sanction what we do here in a library. And I think that we are one of several places in the community where whether it's our churches or our homes, we have to adjust until we can fix what is happening elsewhere, until the politics change. We have to adapt. And part of the African-American experience has been what I like to call the fugitivity of our educational pursuits. They never wanted us to learn to read and write. They didn't want books in our hands. They didn't, even when we could read, there were certain things that they wanted us to have and not other curricula that they did not. But we've always found a way to do that. And so a time like this is how we tap into those historical lessons and learn how to continue and do the very necessary work that we do. So I hope that addresses your question, Ms. Dellavelle. There you go. All right, at this point, I want to conclude. Please get a round of applause for Margaret Seidler, Senator Mia McLeod, all the way from the great state of South Carolina. I want to do a couple of things before we close out here and go into our reception. I hope that all of you will stay here. We have a special menu. I don't know if it will do justice to the food that you're used to in the Low Country, but we have a Low Country inspired menu for our opening reception here, prepared by Chef Kamar Lee. I want to read a quote from Chad Scott, who wrote an article about this conversation and exhibition for Forbes magazine. And I want to leave it with our audience because I think there's quite a bit within these words that we should hang on to. Chad Scott wrote that no one living in America in 2025 is responsible for the nation's history of slavery. No one living in America in 2025, everyone living in America in 2025, however, is responsible for either acknowledging or working to repair the damage it created, damage continuing through the present day, or for erasing and obscuring that history and working towards re-entrenching the racial and labor power dynamics it reinforced. So thank you for the work that you are doing to help us to continue to repair this breach. As we conclude, I want to just take another moment to thank our partners, the Partners in Racial Justice. I want to thank the Gullah Geechee Heritage Corridor for their support. I want to acknowledge Luando Wright and the Friends of Arlick, as well as Wayne and Lucretia Weiner for their support of our Cultural Conversation series. And if you like what you experienced today, I invite you to visit our website and find out more about our future events. You can view that at arlick.broward.org. You can also follow us on Eventbrite for more of our event listing. The last thing I'd like for us to do before we leave this hall, I would invite you to join me in a moment of silence for all of the victims of the transatlantic slave trade and those who experienced chattel slavery here in the United States. Thank you. Enjoy the reception. Please experience the exhibition To Be Sold in Slave Labor and Slave Trading in the Antebellum South. Thank you for being here. And get a book.